Welcome to today's Grad Prof Dev webinar, Creating a Better Poster. My name is Heather Brandt, and I will be moderating today's webinar. I'm Associate Dean in the Graduate School and Professor of Health Promotion, Education, and Behavior in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. Today's webinar will be presented by Dr. Shawnda Schroeder with Jennifer Mandelbaum and Nicholas Resciniti, doctoral candidates in the Arnold School of Public Health. But before I begin, I have a few reminders for those of you who are viewing the webinar live. Please take a moment to familiarize yourself with the webinar toolbar. We do have handouts for today's webinar, and you can access these under the handouts ribbon on the webinar toolbar. If you have questions during the webinar, enter your questions under the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar. We'll be taking questions at the end of today's webinar. If you are viewing the recorded version, you may email gradprofdev@sc.edu for a PDF of today's webinar materials. In addition, for all of you who have registered for the webinar, following today's webinar, an email will be sent out with the materials that we have available. So let's get started. Our first presenter today will be Dr. Shawnda Schroeder, who is a Research Associate Professor for the Center for Rural Health at the University of North Dakota, School of Medicine and Health Sciences in Grand Forks. Dr. Schroeder participates in rural health research, directs state program evaluation, and supervises graduate student internship and practicum experiences at the Center for Rural Health. Dr. Schroeder serves as principal investigator of the Rural Health Research Gateway, a website that provides access to publications and projects funded through the Federal Office of Rural Health Policy. She also, through her work with the Mountain Plains Mental Health Technology Transfer Center, provides training on rural mental health, leads web content management, and conducts research on stigma as well as mental health training needs. Her research interests include healthcare access, health disparities, workforce, and oral health. Dr. Schroeder is the lead for several oral health studies serving on statewide and national oral health coalitions and work groups. She is a member of the editorial board for the Journal of Rural Health and is an elected member of the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences Research Committees. Our next presenter will be Jennifer Mandelbaum. Jennifer Mandelbaum is a doctoral student in health promotion, education, and behavior in the Arnold School of Public Health at the University of South Carolina. Her scholarship aims to better understand how evidence-based research on chronic disease prevention is translated into public health practice. Her current research focuses on two areas: the uptake of childhood obesity screening and treatment recommendations into pediatric primary care, and diabetes and heart disease prevention and management in South Carolina. At the university, Jennifer is a presidential fellow, former graduate civic scholar, and the immediate past president of the Graduate Student Association. And just a plug, elections are today through tomorrow at 5 p.m. for this year's officers in the Graduate Student Association. She has given more than 30 scientific presentations at national and international conferences, garnering poster awards from the American Public Health Association, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and Society for Epidemiologic Research. Our third and final presenter is Nick Resciniti, who is a doctoral candidate of epidemiology in the Arnold School of Public Health. He received his MPH in infectious diseases and microbiology from the University of Pittsburgh in 2016, and he is a third-year PhD candidate. His research focus is related to caregivers, aging-related disorders, and the microbiome. He has a passion for presenting and disseminating research through different pathways, such as professional conferences. Nick has presented over 10 poster presentations and 2 oral presentations. So before I turn things over to Dr. Schroeder, I'm going to launch a poll for those of you who are viewing the webinar live. Have you ever used the Better Poster format? So if you could just take a moment to Let us know if you've ever used the format. That will be helpful information. So for those of you who are viewing live, please take a moment to vote in the poll. All right, well, thank you for voting. The responses are overwhelmingly no, that you have never used the better poster format. So today's webinar will be particularly timely for you to learn more about this new way of presenting important information related to our research and scholarship. And while we may not be able to attend and present at professional conferences in person right now, there still are ways that you can enhance your research presence online and also prepare to use this format in the future. So that's enough for me. I am pleased to turn over the controls to Dr. Schroeder, who is going to talk us through steps to creating a better poster, followed up with firsthand experiences from Jennifer and Nick. Dr. Schroeder, take it away.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Brandt. Yes, so it's good to know what everybody's experience is. So thank you for answering that poll. That really does help. Just as a little bit of background, Dr. Brandt, please move to the next slide. I am the principal investigator for the Rural Health Research Gateway, and I do work on a plethora of other research grants and programs and with different organizations, but I really wanted to highlight this one just for one reason, and that's because a lot of my experience in health research dissemination comes because of my work with the Rural Health Research Gateway. Our purpose at Gateway is to disseminate all of the research findings of our rural health research centers in as many ways as possible. So that includes helping them understand how to do poster presentations, disseminating their journal articles, their policy briefs, their fact sheets, including heat maps and a lot of different modes, social media, YouTube. And the reason that I think I'm here today is partly because South Carolina does have a rural health research center, and I've been working with colleagues there for a while on trying to get the better poster format in some of our rural health conference to be used as the primary template. So if you can advance to the next slide, please. One of the things we did for our researchers is we developed through Gateway a dissemination toolkit, and it was really intended to focus on that stage 4 of knowledge translation, and that was tailoring and telling others about your research. I'm guessing most of you are graduate students, and so you're very familiar with the process of developing your research question and doing the design and the collection, and we really wanted to focus in on this topic of how do you disseminate the information that you've now discovered. And ideally in translation science, you would be asking that question when you first develop your research question. At the end of the day, what are we hoping to find and how are we hoping to share that message? And that will make a better product and better outreach. A poster presentation falls right into that number 4 of this process. Go ahead and advance the slide. So here is a picture of that toolkit. It's available in a PDF and it's also available electronically. And I just shared that today as a screenshot in case you're interested in other modes of dissemination in addition to poster presentations. You can see in the PDF or the hard copy of our toolkit, poster presentations start on about page 18. And next slide. And in our online version, it's actually interactive. So I've put the link there for those of you who are interested. And in the left-hand column, you'll find areas where you can click poster presentation. It'll bring you to the tips and guide for how to do a good poster presentation. And then in the top right-hand corner, they will have examples for you to click through. In fact, you will actually have examples of the better poster format directly from this website as well. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested in other modes of dissemination, to visit this website as well. Next slide. Today, I'm really going to only focus in on one, though, and that would be the poster presentation. There are some general rules and tips regarding poster presentations that are the same regardless of whether or not you are using the traditional format or you are using the new better poster format. And that is the purpose of a poster really is to just efficiently communicate the concepts and the data using text and visual. It really allows the author to network because the point of the poster presentation is that you are standing next to your poster while others are walking through a massively large hall and asking you questions and viewing posters that are of interest to them. What is great about poster presentations compared to maybe a podium presentation, for example, is that it really does facilitate that exchange of ideas. While you might give a 1 to 2 minute presentation of what viewers are seeing, they're also getting the opportunity to visit with you and engage in conversation, and groups can congregate around a poster, and then you have an exchange of ideas of upward of 10 people standing around this particular topic poster. And so it really does foster communication and engagement when done well, and when the poster is able to pull in and draw an audience. Next slide. So there are some general rules, again, regardless of which format you're using. One of the general rules is to really limit the focus of the poster. If you have dedicated the last 1 to 3 years of your life really engaged in a complex research question, there is no doubt that you want to share all of the results. But I would encourage you to then come back to that dissemination toolkit and think about all of the different ways you can share your work and focus in on just one piece of information for this poster. You really want to have focus because you want to have very little text on your poster, and you can't do that if you're really trying to illustrate several different findings from a study. You generally pick one and run with it, and consider having more than one poster at a conference if it's allowable and if they have different sessions. When you do have a poster, it's really important to accentuate the most important information or the key finding. You can accentuate by visually bolding, drawing it out with a figure or a table. Really try to highlight that key component, or what is the biggest takeaway. If somebody glances at your poster and then just leaves, what are you hoping they leave with? Really try to rely on the use of graphics to tell the story, but do not use unnecessary graphics. So we don't want to include a piece of clip art that isn't going to add to the understanding of the data or the findings of your research. The average viewing time of a poster is about 3 minutes, so I would encourage you to find a colleague who does not know your research or isn't familiar with your poster, set a timer and give them 3 minutes to casually absorb what you've developed, and then stop them and ask them what they took away. And that can be a really good way to test whether or not you've developed an effective poster, because they'll tell you what they've walked away with, and you'll know whether or not that's what you had intended. If the poster is going to be judged, ask for the judging criteria. It's a really helpful guide, and generally conferences will really lay out for you specifically what they want regarding the size of the poster, the size of font, how many fonts you can use, which font types to use. I've gone to conferences where they basically said, this is the poster you must use, now just fill in your words. And I've also been to conferences where they said, really, we don't care, get creative and do what you can. So it's important to know what the conference wants from you before you put time and effort into designing your poster. Ensure that your objectives and main points stand out and are really easy to identify, and make sure you follow the size regulations set forth by the conference. I'm going to reiterate that a couple of times because there's nothing worse than getting to a conference than finding out your poster is far smaller than every other poster that is there, or too large to fit on the boards that you're allowed to pin to. So do pay attention to that. Next slide. Language and layout. Use phrases in places of sentences when you can. Use active verbs, not passive. That's very hard for those of us in North Dakota and Minnesota who we're said to be a little bit too North Dakota nice, and we never want to take credit for anything. We always want to say we, us, they did, we would, instead of saying, this is the case, take action now. So really think about using that active voice. Keep your titles free of jargon, no acronyms, less than 10 words. And this is, again, great where you can bring in a colleague or a friend or a family member even who doesn't know your topic and say, does my title make sense? Does it draw you in? Use visual focus, and do use tables sparingly. Long tables especially shouldn't be included on a poster. Remember that 3-minute viewing time. use plenty of white space. It's more comfortable for the eye, and it allows people to transition better between sections. And really focus on not trying to get too creative. Try to stay at 3 font styles and sizes, and nothing smaller than a size 18. Next slide. So these are 2 examples of posters that we had been doing prior to the Better Poster format. This is a very typical standard poster where you have the intro, methods, findings, discussion. You have a figure that really was a better table, but we knew not to do a long table. But I was a partner on this poster, and I will self-admit that it's too much information. If I come to this poster from the title, I don't even know what the findings are. I just know that it's about stigma. And so if I'm not interested and I just looked at this visually and kept walking through a conference hall, I've really left with nothing. Next slide, please. Here's another example of a poster that we have done, and this one was about dental screenings for nursing home residents. The title gets a little bit more to the point. It doesn't have jargon, it doesn't have acronyms. However, it's still not really making somebody leave with what is the impact of this research, what is the research, and what should I leave with? And that's where the Better Poster really can come in handy. Again, I was a co-author on this poster, but I'm going to critique and say that it doesn't leave a viewer with as much information as they could glean from the Better Poster format. And so in a little bit here, we're actually going to walk through this particular poster and redesign it into the Better Poster format and see what you think, if we can actually improve it, and if it does, get the point across a little bit better. So hopefully you've observed this a little bit while I'm talking. You've kind of thought about what did you take away from this poster? And I'm sort of hoping that what you took away from this wasn't much, because then when we do the Better Poster format, I'm hoping you walk away with a lot more and can see the utility of the new format. Next slide, please. So what is this Better Poster format? I keep mentioning it and you still have no idea what it is. So what it is it's an overhaul of the traditional poster because there are fewer words. It has a stronger highlight on the key finding and the critical takeaway, and it does that with very plain language. Basically, if you had to describe to your 5th grader what you do for a living, which I think I have to describe to my 3rd grader all of the time, but if you had to do that, how would you do it in a language that they would understand? You don't need to have p-values. You don't need to have jargon that will pull somebody away from the finding. What do you want them to leave with? This also encourages presenters to get creative and think about how they are translating their research. And as one who develops the poster, it can save you time. There are templates, and it's meant to make it easy because they don't want researchers spending more time on developing the poster than they did on doing the research. And this new Better Poster format recognizes that attendees don't have time to stop and read every poster, even though they may be interested. And it also recognizes that even those 3 minutes that we talked about earlier may not be feasible. So how do we make sure somebody that walks past our poster but doesn't even stop leaves with new knowledge? And then one of the other benefits is that you can organize the conference by color. And I'm going to speak to that a little bit more as we see an example. Next slide, please. Here is the visual of the Better Poster format. This is just a small screenshot without any real information, but it gives you the basic outline. There are links included today, as Dr. Brent mentioned, where you can actually go and pull these templates, and it sounds that she's also provided for you the templates used by your university, and so it should really be easy to implement this new Better Poster format. As you can see, I think the biggest difference and the best piece and the best takeaway from this format is that center box. That center box should be that main finding. So if I am walking through a conference hall, holding my breakfast and my coffee, because that's what time the posters were scheduled for, I can walk through this conference hall with my mouth full, not stopping to ask questions, and still see and gaze upon a dozen posters and walk away with new knowledge just from the finding alone. And then if something really sparks my interest, I can stop, go visit, and ask further questions. But the idea is that once I've walked through that one hall, I have taken in, by reading a single sentence or 2 sentences per poster, I've taken in an entire breadth of new knowledge and research findings. Next slide, please. So to walk through the format just a little bit more detail, that left bar, you have the title, but now your title can be even shorter and less informative, because a lot of times we try to make that title fit our key finding, but you don't need to do that anymore, because that key finding is going to be the central focus of the poster. Your intro will still explain why your study matters, but now it should be brief, plain language. It shouldn't be a full lit review. We'll look at it in the example coming up, but in my world of oral health, instead of citing all of the different diseases that are associated or correlated with poor oral health, I can just say, poor oral health leads to worse overall health, period. And if somebody wants more information, that's when they can engage in conversation with me. Your methods should be brief, but they should be clear and state what you did so that those who are looking at your findings know that they're reputable. Your results should be as visual as possible and only present the data that supports that main finding you put in the big block in the center. I know that you're going to have a lot of other results. I know that there's going to be findings that led you to ask the next question in your research that then led to the next question. But you really do, for the poster, at least the better poster format, need to focus that result. And then leave that discussion. That discussion, I think, is extremely important. It can be a couple of bullets, but why does this matter? And I know that Dr. Brandt is coming from the world of public health, where I think, this is my own bias, but I think that we do that better in public health and health services research. I think we do really well with that discussion and talking about the impact for the community. So make sure you address that in your discussion section. Next slide, please. The main finding. This, even though it's only 1 or 2 sentences, if you're anything like me, you'll spend most of your time on this one section, because this is the meat of your poster. This is what you want people to leave with. And this is how you have to try to translate your science into a single sentence or 2 in very plain language. Don't muddy it with tables and figures. Keep it simple. Use a left alignment. Don't center the text. And make sure that people leave with the piece of information you want them to use to act and lead action in communities or in health. Also on this better poster format, I'm sure you've noticed now that QR code. The QR code, and I will provide some tips on how to get them, but the QR code is really meant to then give everybody all of that extra work that it's killing you not to include in the poster. That can be at your QR code. The QR code can be extremely useful for those of us who don't like cutting down our research to one sentence. Next slide, please. So to format a QR code, things that your QR code can go to would be a journal article that you've written and published on the topic. It can go to a program page that you might be describing. It can go to a policy brief. It can lead to your bio. It can really lead to anything that helps substantiate the work you're presenting. And it may be even worthwhile developing a white paper or a policy brief to support your poster and putting it online prior to the poster session. There are several free services where you can generate QR codes, and you can actually pay for these services as well if you want to change the color, the shape, and the design. But for your beginning posters, a simple QR code works fine. But also in terms of web standards, I would strongly encourage you not to include a QR code that doesn't have meaning. Don't use one just for the sake of using it. Make sure it links to something that's valuable. If you don't have additional pages to link to, you can get rid of the QR code. Next slide, please. The way the QR code works, for those of you who maybe aren't as familiar, you'll enter any kind of address into a code generator. You'll save the file. You'll paste it right into your poster template. And anytime an attendee goes to take a photo of your poster, it will take them directly to the URL. Older phone models used to require that you had an app for viewing QR codes, but that's not even the case in newer models of phones now, cell phones. You can just simply go into your photos, take a photo, and it will generate to the web page. Next slide, please. Here's an example of a QR code generator. If you're sitting there right now and you want to open up your phone and take a picture of that QR code, it should take you to my university's website. And it really is as simple as you see. I went to the website, I entered my URL, and it gave me the QR code automatically. And those 3 little vertical dots in the top right corner, I can click them and select save. And I've now got my static QR code. Next slide, please. The right-hand bar. Now this is hard for those of us who are a type A personality, but the right-hand bar has been, it has a couple of different names, but essentially what it is your extras. This is where, if you can imagine yourself standing at a poster presentation, you would stand in front of this section of your poster. Nobody sees that section if you're standing in front of it anyway. So the idea is that what you throw into this right-hand bar is everything else. Any p-value, any table, any small font, any literature you want to make sure you cite. If you used a survey, maybe here's where you're putting in the survey methodology and talking about how its validity and reliability. Maybe in this section, you're including all of the information about the data set that you utilize because you're concerned about the questions you'll get about the vitality of the data. And so this section is really for you to think through what questions you might get asked where you would like almost a cheat sheet. And you can throw all of that into this, this bar of your poster. But the idea is that you do not spend a lot of time formatting this. It's not meant to look nice. It's what you stand in front of and refer to should you get a complex question you weren't prepared to answer. And I shouldn't even say weren't prepared. At no time should you be expected to remember the p-value for every variable you've run. So that would be an example. You can throw a table of crosstabs in here because nobody expects you to remember all the very specific p-values, but it might be something somebody would ask you during your presentation. Next slide, please. I will just say I threw these in as examples. They're places that you can get images that you can use on your better poster format. But the only thing I really want to drive home here is that what you need to ensure that you don't do is use images that have copyright. You don't want to do copyright infringement because you included a cute little hat image on your better poster. So just keep that in consideration as you think about images to utilize. Next slide, please. This is the APA, the American Psychological Association, has adopted using the better poster format. They revised it slightly in their template, and you can see that they actually cut the QR code. But what they did is this dark green can be used to organize the conference by color. So it's very common that you'll enter a conference and they will have different topics of posters. So for an example, I've gone to a conference before where there was a row of posters focused on the topic of aging and health. Then there was a row focused on oral health. Then there was a row focused on maternal health. And you sort of picked based off of the signs that were high up above the poster sections. However, the better poster format recommends putting them by color code. So when I came to a conference, as an example, every green poster might indicate a quantitative study. Every purple poster may indicate qualitative. Or maybe they do still want to organize it by topic. So everything in light blue is aging. Everything in purple is related to Alzheimer's research. And it allows an attendee to very quickly and easily find posters in the topic area of their interest or in the methodology of their interest. Next slide, please. So what are the benefits? It still fosters conversation, but now it's really easy to identify that critical takeaway. It's visually appealing, it's eye-catching, people might be more willing to stop if they understand your research findings. It helps the poster to stand out, especially in the current environment. If you are using a better poster format at a conference in which attendees are still using the traditional format, it will stand out. It encourages you to think about what actually is the most important in your research. You can't sort of hide all of your additional findings in the narrative because you aren't having a narrative. You're focusing on that one key finding. And also the fact that there are so many templates that have been developed, it does make it easier to develop the poster for the researcher. Next slide, please. Okay, so recognizing I want to leave enough time for my colleagues on the call today to actually talk about their experience in doing the better poster format, I was going to walk you through this example so we can really see the benefit firsthand in changing the design of a poster from the traditional format into the better poster format. And so again, I feel like I'm allowed to critique this poster because it was one that I'd used years ago, and I basically just sort of revamped it. Had I had the better poster format at my fingertips at this time, I would have loved to have used it. Next slide, please. So to begin, I'm going to overlay with my key finding. Previously, you were looking at the large poster where you could see the title, but the title really just mentioned that dental screening in nursing home residents, that there would be a national promising practice. You don't know what that promising practice is, and you don't know what kind of a dental screen we're needing to do. But here, now that we have this key takeaway, if I were walking through the conference and I just glanced at this poster, I would find out that nursing home residents should have a standard dental screen completed by a clinical nurse and a dental hygienist to meet federal guidelines and improve oral health. Well, that's the novel finding. Nursing homes don't use both a clinical nurse and a dental hygienist. And so that's the part that we wanted to really bold and have attendees walk away with. And again, it's very basic language. In our journal article that we wrote around this topic, it has everything to do with CMS codes, the residential assessment instrument, federal guidelines, law, regulation. It's very jargoned. It doesn't give you something to walk away with. It's nuanced. Next slide, please. And now here you can see the left-hand bar. And I will tell you, it would look cleaner if we developed this poster in its origination, but this was me just trying to throw it together for the slides to illustrate for you all the benefit of the better poster format. Here we still have that same title. It doesn't give you as much information. And in the introduction, instead of having all of that complex literature on the causes of poor oral health and what poor oral health is what it is related to in terms of overall health, we just have 3 bullets that say that nursing home residents have poor oral health. In a journal article, that will get torn apart because you need to cite that. What do you mean by poor oral health? What are the variables of consideration? What are the things that play into the poor oral health of nursing home residents? And what about insurance status? There are all of these questions we ask in a journal article that we need to forget about when doing the better poster format. This is so that people will come and have that conversation with you, but they leave with just the basic information from your poster. So dental screens are completed without clinical nursing staff or by clinical nursing staff that don't have oral health training. Again, that was about 3 pages of research in our journal article. And then the next bullet, poor oral health is associated with worse health. And then we do have a couple of citations, but we made it visual. And then for the method, 3 very basic bullets. Next slide, please. And then over in that other column is just the other stuff, the noise, the things that we don't really need to draw attention to, but I want to be able to remember where in the CMS resident assessment instrument it discusses the federal regulations. And I want to be able to speak to how many nursing home residents there are in the United States. And so I've thrown all of those data points into this column. I've also included the screening tool that we developed. So now if somebody comes by and says, well, what is that tool? What is the best practice? I can step to the side and let them see it. But also that QR code takes them to the manual and the guidelines that we developed. So I can encourage them to take a photo of that QR code and get to the resource that they might be after. Next slide, please. And these I just put in as examples, but I'm not going to break them down simply because I know my colleagues are going to share with you some of the work that they've done. Next slide, please. And again, just another visual, and these are using the color scheme of our State Department of Health, who was our partner on these posters. So that's another consideration is what kind of logos do you need to utilize? And it sounds like Dr. Brandt answered that for you with some of the templates that are available to you today. Next slide. And then finally, regardless of if you do the traditional poster or if you utilize the better poster format, there are some things to keep in mind when you present. I just wanted to end on this because sometimes we can get so concerned with what the poster looks like, we forget that we really are the expert, not the poster. We are the ones sharing the information. We have to be able to convey what we've found. So dress and carry yourself professionally, be confident, Listen as much as you speak. That's the true benefit of a poster presentation compared to a podium presentation, and that's that you get to engage in conversation. Practice, recognize that 3-minute view, think of your elevator speech, look for opportunities to collaborate in the future, and be prepared for critique. That's what that right-hand part of your poster is for. Fill it with what you need to have those engaging conversations. And while you may not be an expert on a topic overall, you are an expert on your work, and remember that and be confident in your work. Again, practice, and remember your audience. I think it's really important to recognize that if you're at a particular conference in health, you might have clinicians, you might have researchers, you might have individuals who work in program implementation, quality improvement. They're not all going to have the same level of knowledge on your topic, and recognize who your audience is as you present the information. And again, practice. Don't forget the 3-minute viewing time. Next slide. This is just a video that you can watch that talks about the traditional format to the current. I'm not playing it today. It's just there for those of you who might want to watch it later, who are more of a visual learner. Next slide, please. Additional resources are here so that you can have them at a later time. Next slide, please. And this is just our connection information for the Rural Health Research Gateway, should you want to follow and see some of the methodologies that we use for research dissemination. Next slide. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Brandt.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder, for that excellent overview of the Better Poster format and how we can think about transferring our traditional format into the Better Poster format. So as I mentioned and introduced earlier, we have 2 current doctoral students who also happen to be in the general field of public health, who are going to be with us to share some information on their firsthand experiences using the Better Poster format. So first, we're going to hear from Jennifer. So Jennifer, if you could begin your part of the presentation.
Great. Well, thank you, Dr. Brandt, for inviting me to speak, and Dr. Schroeder for that excellent overview of the Better Posters format. Next slide, please. So what I really like and what Dr. Schroeder touched on about the Better Posters design is that it puts you as the researcher kind of at the center. So it's really about what story you're trying to tell about whatever work you're presenting. And it's a more, I think, a more meaningful way to engage with other people when you go to conferences. So on the left, I have an example of a poster I recently put together for the Society of Behavioral Medicine conference, and they've encouraged presenters to use the Better Poster format. I'm still figuring out exactly how to translate that to a vertical poster, but one of the things I like about the Better Poster design is that I think it takes a lot of those kind of basic principles of good design and puts it in an easy to use format. So some of the tips that Dr. Schroeder discussed are things that you can translate to a poster or a presentation or a handout, because a lot of those principles are transferable. So in the example I have on the left, you can see that I've kind of highlighted our main point at the top in larger font, and there's that big graphic, and that's that figure is really the take-home message we want people viewing our poster to see. And then at the bottom, it's a little bit more text heavy, so that's where we have some more detail. So not quite the same as the Better Poster design Dr. Schroeder went over, but you can still see some of those elements in there. I really want to emphasize that this Better Poster or good poster design in general is about showing, not telling, and that it's okay to embrace white space. And when in doubt, take that material out. I know for a lot of people, myself included, that can be a challenge, right? You put all this work into your research, you want to tell people everything, but really, as Dr. Schroeder mentioned, you're the presenter, not your poster. So your poster should draw people in, kind of highlight the main points. But if people want to learn more, which hopefully they will after seeing your poster, then they can ask those questions. And then whether you're using that that kind of better poster template with the information on the right-hand side or not, you can always include supplementary material. So sometimes that's with a QR code so people can access that information on their phone. Sometimes it's with a handout. So I think there are some neat ways to continue to engage people with your work beyond just your poster presentation. Next slide, please. And then I just wanted to highlight a few additional resources for you. So the first is Dr. Ecker Rivera. So if you go to her website, there's a link to her YouTube channel, and she has this great presentation where she essentially takes these like really busy text heavy slides like that climate change statistics slide you'll see on the left hand side of the screen, and puts each of those bullet points into a nice graphic. And I think for those of us who might struggle with wanting to put all our information out there and have a hard time kind of paring it down to the main points, how to do that, and something that you can translate to how do you
Jennifer, I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you. It could be my connection, but just wanted to see if you could hear and respond.
resources for how to remove some of that text, embrace that white space, and draw people into your poster. So thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Our next doctoral student presenter is Nick Resciniti, who is also in the Arnold School of Public Health, and he is going to share some of his experiences as well. Nick?
Hi, thank you, Dr. Brandt, and thank you for inviting me, and wonderful presentation by Dr. Schroeder and Jennifer. A lot of the points that I'm going to make is going to seem like a mini presentation of what Dr. Schroeder has mentioned, so bear with me for that. But you can also take it as anecdotal evidence of what she said too. Can you please go to the next slide? Before I begin, I just wanted to mention why I think that poster presentations are a powerful way to disseminate your research at a conference. As we know, and as Dr. Schroeder has mentioned, there's two main ways in order to do this: the podium presentation and the poster presentation. With the podium presentation, it's wonderful for disseminating a breadth of knowledge on your research and research that has been done previously, but you kind of lose that one-on-one or that one-on-few connection. But that's where the advantage of the poster design is. You're able to make these connections and tailor your responses to each audience member that's there in order to facilitate better discussion and disseminate your research in a better way. But one of the key aspects in order to disseminate your research with a poster presentation is the ability to draw someone in. And to me, and throughout this presentation, we have saw that the better poster design has been developed to do that. If someone's walking by, they're able to at least get a little bit information with the better poster design, or that they'll be drawn in and you know that they'll be interested, and it'll create a better discussion, in my opinion. But now I'll talk about my experience with the better poster design. As you can see here, this is not it. This is a poster that I created in 2019 for Discover UofSC Day, and it was a focus group that I conducted for dementia caregivers. And the main thing that I wanted people to get away was in the results section in the middle there. But as you can see, someone that is close up may have a hard time even understanding what the results that I want them to see is, let alone people that are walking by from a farther distance. But around, I think, April 2019, the better poster design really started to catch fire, and a lot more people started to use it. So I decided to change this poster into a better poster design in order to experiment and see how powerful that it can be. Can you please go to the next slide? Thank you. And as you can see here, here's the new poster design that I transferred the older poster design to this better poster design. And right away, you can see that center block that Dr. Schroeder was talking about with the main findings that I wanted people to understand. And since this was a qualitative design, I wanted people to read the quotes and understand, you know, this is a qualitative design about dementia caregivers and get a powerful message out of this. And from my experience using this new or better poster design, I found that people walking by were more likely to stop and read what was on my poster compared to the traditional design, and also engage in more discussion. And those discussions that I did have were more meaningful and more powerful. So to me, I think I'm sold on this better poster design. I'm sure there's formats that traditional design is, you know, more advantageous, but it definitely, that experience definitely sold me. But even though it did sell me, I'm looking at this now and through the past experiences that I had and Dr. Schroeder's presentation, there's definitely ways that I can improve upon this poster design. And I feel like that's not anything troublesome. I feel like we can improve on many things. So I encourage everybody to try this poster design, see how it works for them, see how it works in the field, and maybe they find ways that they can improve it to better disseminate their research. But that's all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick, for sharing that with us. So I use a quote from Darcy Gentleman quite often that the best presentations start conversations. And I think the better poster format is really designed to facilitate conversations about you and about your research. And this innovative new format that's come on the scene in the last few years has really transformed those conversations. I've experienced this firsthand, as you heard from our other presenters today, as well as watched that happen for others who have chosen to use this format. And really to be able to convey an important take-home message about their research and scholarship, and then people can get into the details as they're interested in additional information. So right now I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm interested in hearing from you about how likely you are to use the better poster format. Of course, right now we're not participating in in-person conferences, but will in the future. So let us know. Go ahead and take a moment to respond to the poll to tell us how likely you are to use the better poster format in the future. So far, most of you are very likely to use the format, and 25% of you are somewhat likely to use the format. So that's quite a switch from the poll that we had run earlier in today's webinar, where we found out that at that time, none of our participants who are viewing live had a chance to use the format previously. So I have a few updates to share with you, and while I'm doing that, please use the questions ribbon in the webinar toolbar to be able to ask your questions of any of today's presenters. As a reminder, for those of you who are viewing the webinar live, you can access the handouts, which include PDFs of today's webinar slides and additional slides. So you'll notice that we covered a chunk of the information, but there are also some additional slides for your reference, all in one place for you to be able to refer in the future. So please make sure to download those handouts. And for everyone who's registered for the webinar to this point, I will be sending out an email with those attachments. You will have access to this recording as soon as it's available. So our professional development offerings for the spring semester have of course changed to virtual, and it's during Graduate Student Appreciation Week that we offered a virtual chat with Dean Cheryl Addy. And in the chat function, I included the information on how you can access the recording of the virtual chat with Dean Addy. I'll also put that in the questions bar for you guys to be able to see as well in response. In addition, right now, while we're working virtually, the best place to get updates about information affecting graduate education and the university as a whole are at the landing page, go.sc.edu/coronavirus. We're still offering Grad Prof Dev Professional Development Friday programming online. You can check out our content across these various social media platforms. And you also can take advantage of the university's institutional membership to the National Center for Faculty Development and Diversity. You just need to use your University of South Carolina email address to take advantage of this resource. The same is true for the National Postdoctoral Association. Both of these organizations have excellent resources available for graduate students, in addition to those who have completed their degree, and for those of you who are perhaps interested in entering into faculty careers for what comes next after degree. So with that, we're open and ready for your questions. And of course, to the presenters, you can also add any additional information. I do want to remind you about getting the handouts that are available if you're viewing the webinar live, and use the questions ribbon on the webinar toolbar to ask any questions that you have about this format. So go ahead and type those in to the questions ribbon. And in the meantime, as you are thinking about your questions, I have a couple of questions for the presenters. So for the presenters, my question is more of a logistic or technical question, I guess. In terms of the size of the poster, we've seen such varied sizes of posters. There's a size for the Discover USC University-Wide Research Day. For X professional meeting, it's this size. For this one, it's this size. Do you think that the amount of content that you might include is going to be influenced by the size, or do you think the template really applies universally for using the format? So if you would just like to add in, it's a question we get quite often about the template that's available. So anything you'd like to add in there?
This is Shawnda. I guess I would think that in my experience, I've done several sizes, and sort of, as you heard our previous presenters talk about, moving it from vertical to horizontal can really be a challenge. So I'll let Jennifer speak to that a little bit more, but absolutely, I think the template can be used and should be used still, and I would really caution against the idea that because I have a bigger poster or a bigger size allotment, I can put more in it. Do not do that. I think that's probably the biggest risk you run, is trying to then put in more information just because you have a bigger size. And on the template website, they do provide several other options for sizing and for directionality of the poster. So I'd encourage you to check those out as well. But absolutely, my biggest caution would be don't put in more information just because you've been given more space. And Nick spoke to that too. Really rely on the white space if that's the case. And Nick, Jennifer, if you want to also weigh in.
Thank you, Dr. Schroeder. That's helpful. It's one of the dangers I always think of, the 6 feet by 4 feet poster size that is used at some conferences I attend. And I think about how people could possibly use some hybrid version that still includes a lot of information. So it's good to think about how, regardless of the orientation of the poster or the size dimensions that are provided as parameters for presentation, that you can still apply and use this format in the way that it's set up. Just a reminder that under the handouts ribbon, you also can access the landscape version of the Better Poster template. One is specific to the University of South Carolina, and one is an Arnold School one that I have used previously. So what other questions might you have for our presenters today? And again, I also would offer to our presenters to come off mute and share any additional information that you may have about using the format or your experiences. All right, I don't see any questions coming through right now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap things up. Thank you for joining us for today's Grad Prof Dev webinar on creating a better poster. Special thanks to our presenters, Dr. Shawnda Schroeder, Jennifer Mandelbaum, and Nick Resciniti for joining us to share this information that's going to be very useful for our future presentations, poster presentations, and even many of these concepts certainly apply to our oral or podium presentations as well. So thanks again for joining us. Please remember to refer to the coronavirus main landing page if you have any questions about university functions. And if you have any questions about this webinar or our other professional development programming, please email us at gradprofdev@sc.edu. Thanks for joining us.